In the late 12th century, on the dusty rim of Khorasan, a coppersmith named Sahl did something the village could not forgive. He carried his tools to a ruined orchard and sat beneath a pomegranate tree, upright, unmoving, for 9 days. No bread, no water, no sleep anyone could prove. Boys dared each other to spit at him. Old men muttered that a jinn had hollowed him out. But Sahl's eyes stayed open, fixed not on the horizon, but on the seam between one breath and the next. An invisible door most people trample past. On the 10th morning he stood. His beard had gone ash-white, yet his face looked lit, as if a lamp had been placed behind bone. When the imam demanded an explanation, Sahl answered, "I entered the room where the breath listens. This is not folklore. It's a map." The Sufis called it Hudr al-Qal, the arrival of the heart, the lost art of being here without fleeing into yesterday or bargaining with tomorrow. Learn it, and the mind returns to its place. Servant, not king. Now, we live in an age that worships speed and calls it life. The body sits at a table, but the mind is in another room, scrolling, regretting, rehearsing, defending. Even our pleasures are rented. Music layered over walking, a podcast stitched onto eating, screens at midnight, so we never have to meet the dark. The Sufis gave this trance a name, ghafla, heedlessness. Not ignorance of facts, but absence from reality itself. Idries Shah hints that the mind, left unattended, becomes a street market. Every merchant shouting, "Me, me," until you can hear your conscience breathe. Jung named the same spell participation mystique. The psyche glued to objects, goals, roles, so completely that we forget there is a watcher behind the wanting. The ego survives by scattering attention across 1,000 mirrors, because a single still mirror would reveal what it fears, the present moment where the old story dies. That is why presence feels dangerous. It is not relaxation. It is a dethroning now. Attar tells a parable, though I'll dress it in new clothes. A traveler named Nia spent 30 years hunting, awakening. He crossed salt deserts, slept in monasteries, argued with philosophers, collected prayers the way misers collect coins. Every teacher repeated the same instruction: find presence. And Niaz always replied, wounded with pride, "I am here, standing before you." But here was only geography. His mind was always negotiating the next lesson. One evening he returned to his childhood valley, empty-handed. By a narrow stream he watched a reed bend in the wind. It snapped, and the broken stalk floated downstream. Niaz followed it with his eyes. No commentary, no plan, just the slow drift, the circles widening, the water receiving the reed without judgment. And something inside him unclenched. Not insight like lightning, more like a fist relaxing after years. He began to weep, not from sadness, but from the horror of recognition. His body had traveled for decades, while his soul was never once fully present. This is the seeker's joke, the pilgrimage that avoids arrival. Jung would say Niaz was trapped in the ego's favorite hallucination. The answer is somewhere else. The ego is made of memory and prediction, yesterday's bruises, tomorrow's defenses. So it cannot tolerate the naked now, because the now contains the grave of its identity. In the present, the persona, your trained mask, begins to rot. The alchemists called this stage negrito, the blackening, the decomposition of false gold. In Sufi language, it is the first taste of fana, the thinning of the separate self. Not a mystical fireworks show, but a psychological fact. When you stop feeding the story, the story starves. That is why distraction is so addictive. It is not merely entertainment. It is anesthesia. The mind runs, judges, plans, remembers, because stillness would expose the void behind its control. What Rumi calls the silent sea beneath the waves of thought. So the question becomes brutal. If the ego survives by motion, what happens when you stand still? Rumi offers a tale like medicine hidden in honey. A scholar named Khorasan became convinced his skull was made of thin clay. A loud sound, a sharp word, a sudden mistake. He believed it would crack and spill his mind onto the floor. So he moved through life like a hostage, careful, apologetic, tense. He wrapped his head in scarves. He refused crowds. He lived inside precautions. Friends debated him for years. Logic bounced off fear like rain off stone. Then an old physician arrived, the kind who does to argue with symptoms. He said, "I will not fight your thought. I will show you what watches the thought." He seated Khorasan in silence and gave one instruction. When fear appears, do not answer it. Observe it. At first, Khorasan panicked. Images of cracking, humiliation, death. But as the hours passed, he noticed something unbearable and liberating. Behind the storm was a stillness that did not shake. Fear moved. The watcher did not. This is the first door. You are not the thought. You are the one aware of the thought. The Sufis call that watcher Shahid, the witnessing presence. Not an idea, but a lived fact that appears the moment you stop wrestling your mind and start seeing it. In Jungian terms, it is the shift from ego identification to the self. The larger center of the psyche that contains the ego the way the sky contains weather. Notice what this means. Thoughts are not enemies. They are biological events, like saliva forming, like lungs moving. The tragedy is that we mistake the event for the experiencer. We climb inside every thought like a prisoner entering a cell. When Khorasan recognized the Shahid, he laughed, not because fear vanished, but because fear lost its throne. He could feel terror and still remain intact. That is real power, not controlling the content, but changing the relationship. Rumi hints at this again and again. The cure is not force. Force strengthens the jailer. Awareness dissolves the bars. And once you glimpse the watcher, a new question awakens. How do you train it so it stays present when life gets loud? The Sufis built precise inner technologies. One is muraqabah, watchfulness. Imagine sitting as if on a hill above a road. Thoughts pass below like travelers, some rich, some ragged, some seductive, some violent. The practice is simple and merciless. You do not chase them. You do not fight them. You do not rent them a room. You watch them arrive and you watch them leave. This is not suppression. Suppression is war. And the unconscious always wins wars in the dark. Muraqabah is disidentification, the alchemical separation of gold from slag. The mind can shout. The watcher does not move. And then a strange terror appears. If you keep watching long enough, you notice there is no solid me behind the thoughts, only sensations, memories, impulses rising and dissolving. The ego hates this discovery. It depends on the fantasy of permanence. But the watcher does not panic, because the watcher was never a story. It is presence itself, the quiet lamp behind experience. This is why muraqabah feels like dying, because something is dying. The claim that you are your narration. Idries Shah tells stories where the punchline is always attention. Here is one, reforged. A disciple complained to his teacher, "My mind is filthy. In prayer, I imagine lovers. At work, I dream of gold. Even speaking to you, I plan my next sentence. I can tame this beast. The teacher gave him a shallow cup filled to the rim with olive oil. Walk through the bazaar, he said, and spill nothing. My student will follow you with a blade. One drop falls, your head follows. The disciple went pale. The bazaar was chaos. Donkeys, shouting merchants, perfume, smoke, children racing. His arms trembled, eyes locked on the trembling surface of oil. Step by step, he moved as if crossing a bridge of glass. When he returned, the cup was full. The teacher asked softly, "Did you think of lovers?" "No." "Of gold?" "No." "Did your mind wander?" "No, master. Only the oil. Only the blade." The teacher nodded. "So you can be present. The problem is you treat presence like a hobby. You must make it real." This parable hides an occult law. Attention is energy, and energy obeys stakes. When consciousness is scattered, it becomes thin, impotent, unable to transform habit, unable to cut addiction at the root. But gathered, it becomes heat. Alchemists knew this. No furnace, no transmutation. Jung translated their furnace into psychology, libido, not merely sexual force, but total psychic energy. When libido leaks into compulsions and fantasies, the person cannot individuate. They remain possessed by fragments. The Sufis called the gathering jam, collection. Its opposite is tafrika, dispersion. Jam is when your being stops leaking through 1,000 holes. Breath, body, hearing, sight, intention, aligned like an arrow. But here's the paradox. If you try to force jam, the ego sneaks back in wearing a holy mask. "Look how disciplined I am." And immediately attention tightens, becomes brittle, and breaks. So the masters used another ingredient, surrender. Not weakness, alchemy's secret solvent. In the Masnavi, surrender is not passive. It is precision without grasping. The Sufis called it taslim, letting the ego's fist open. Because attention is like a cat. Chase it, it runs. Make a quiet room, it appears. So the work becomes less concentration and more return. Again and again, 1,000 times a day. Returning is the true ritual. This is why presence is a rebellion. Modern life is engineered to fracture you. Notifications, outrage cycles, endless content designed to harvest your attention like grain. But the Sufi path refuses to donate psychic energy to the machine. It reclaims it, gathers it, and spends it inward. And then Attar's great symbol arrives like a verdict, the birds. Not as poetry, but as a psychological diagram. 30 birds, each carrying a personality wound, a fear, a fixation. Agree to seek a hidden king. They must cross 7 valleys. Each valley strips another illusion. Most cannot endure it. They would rather keep their identities than find truth. But the ones who survive discover the final surprise. What they sought was not elsewhere. It was the watcher behind their seeking. In Attar's vision, the birds finally reach the high court of the unseen monarch. They demand an audience, some trembling with devotion, some with entitlement. The gate opens. There is no throne, no crowned figure, only a vast mirror, polished like still water. They look and see themselves, not as separate strugglers, but as one pattern. In Persian, 30 birds carries the echo of the king's name, as if language itself whispers the joke. The seeker and the sought were never divided. This is fana in story form, the annihilation of the illusion of separation. Jung would call it the ego's relocation, no longer pretending to be the center, but orbiting the self. The ego interprets this as death because it loses sovereignty. And yes, presence contains that death. Each moment of true presence is a small funeral. The funeral of the commentary, the controller, the one who knows. That is why the mind resists presence with such fury. It would rather suffer in familiar noise than vanish into the silent real. But the Sufis insist. After fana comes baqa, subsistence. Not nothingness, but a wider life, lived from the witness. So how do you cultivate it without turning presence into another ego trophy? First, dhikr, remembrance, not nostalgia, not repeating words like a superstition. Dhikr is rhythmic reorientation, returning the psyche to the real, the way a compass returns to north. A phrase is used like flint. The tongue repeats, then the breath carries it, then the heartbeat absorbs it, until the sound becomes silence. The point is not the syllables. The point is the cutting. The phrase slices through wandering like a blade through fog. Jung understood why this matters. The psyche does not heal through intellect alone. It requires the numinous, the God image within, the mysterium tremendum that makes the ego kneel. Without that vertical axis, mindfulness can become self-absorption, polishing the prison. Dhikr refuses that trap. It binds attention to something larger than mood, larger than self-improvement. It reminds you, you are not the narrator. You are the listening. Second, you track the states. Presence comes and goes. The masters don't moralize it. They observe it. The Sufis spoke of awal, inner states, like weather over a mountain. Some mornings the air is clear. Attention gathers easily. The heart feels near. Other days, veils thicken. The mind is loud, the body heavy, the soul dull. The beginner treats this as failure and adds shame, an extra chain. The adept treats it as data. The sky is clouded today, and still returns. This is the discipline, not heroism, but persistence. The mind wanders, notice. Return. Wanders again, notice. Return again, notice. Return again. The return is the practice. Each return strengthens the witness the way resistance strengthens muscle. Jung would call this strengthening the ego self-axis, the ego learning to report to something deeper than impulse. Over time, the compulsive loops lose fuel because you stop feeding them attention with identity. Third, and most dangerous, you bring presence into ordinary life. The Sufi masters were not only cave dwellers, they were traders, poets, judges, parents. Their laboratory was the marketplace. Washing a bowl becomes a rite. Feeling water, hearing porcelain, watching impatience arise without obeying it. This is how habits die, in daylight, under the witness. But do not romanticize this. Presence does not only reveal peace, it reveals the shadow. Jung's shadow is everything you exile. Envy, craving, cruelty, grief, the hunger to be seen. The rage you pretend is fine. The Sufis knew the same anatomy. They called the nightly practice muhasabah, self-accounting. Not self-hatred, self-seeing. Each night the practitioner reviews the day like a physician, not a prosecutor. Where did I lie? Where did I perform? Where did I betray what I love? Where did I fall asleep inside distraction? The point is not perfection. The point is wholeness. Rumi is line. The wound is where the light enters, is not comfort poetry. It's a mechanic. Your wound is the doorway because it is where you are least offended. If you can remain present with shame, with grief, with desire. Those energies transmute. Lead becomes gold through the heat of awareness, not through denial. This is the real occultism, not controlling outer reality, but reclaiming inner reality from unconscious possession. Presence includes everything, or it's a costume. Return now to Sahl beneath the pomegranate tree, white-bearded, face lit from within. What did he find in the room where the breath listens? Not a vision, not a cosmic secret, not a new identity to brag about. He found the simplest terror and the simplest freedom, the present moment, met without commentary. The Sufi masters did not defeat the mind by domination. They disarmed it by surrender. They discovered that presence is not something you achieve like a certificate. It is what remains when you stop running. To be present is to step out of the trance, to wake in the middle of your own life, to notice that everything you chase, peace, power, clarity, was always hidden in the seam between breaths. So the choice is still yours. You can keep living as a ghost, postponing life until conditions are perfect, until you fix yourself, until the noise finally stops. Or you can die now. Die to the story. Die to the compulsive future. Die to the illusion of control. And in that small death, discover what the mystics kept trying to say without being murdered by language. The door was never locked. The room was always here. The breath has been listening the whole time.